So is it enough to say no kings? Because that's the big movement from the left. They don't want kings, and they're saying Donald Trump is a king. Well, what is it you do want? I'm so tired of being against something. I want to be for something. So, on my website, I've adopted something, and it's been a logo of mine forever. And it's on my, shirts and different things that I have personally forever. And it is a skull and crossbones, but there's a crown that floats above the head of the skull. And this comes from colonial days when they would say no kings, but they followed that with no kings but Christ, meaning the only king they serve is Christ. Everybody else, and that's why there's the skull and crossbones, the leaders of the country are mortal. They die. They turn to dust. But the crown of Christ doesn't. And so my leader is really Christ. And I will have somebody lead us on earth, but I serve Christ, and I will always recognize they don't have the power of Christ. They're not gods. And so that changed everything in America, because kings were considered to be appointed by God, and that changes everything. So when you say no kings, what exactly do you mean? By the way, you can get the No Kings But Christ t-shirt and merch where at glennbeck.com. You can shop now. They're really great. But anyway, it's important to ask, no kings, but what? Well, they'll tell you a democracy. But a democracy gives you kings. It gives you dictators. It gives you authoritarians. We know this because that's why the founders wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution the way they did. And these guys, unlike anybody who is around today, these guys studied this forever. And they were honestly looking for what is the best way we can get people to rule themselves. And they didn't do it. I mean, the reason why our declaration lasted as long as it did is because it starts with almost an apology. It starts like, look, we owe it to you, the king. We owe it to the people of earth. We owe it to God to say why we want to separate. That's the way it starts. It doesn't start with a list of demands. Unlike Antifa, it doesn't start with a list of demands. It starts with, look, you don't understand us. We've tried to explain this to you, but you really don't hear us. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. You don't believe that as the king. You are more equal. You are appointed by God. But we believe God gives every man certain rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You don't believe that. So they were explaining what they were trying to create. What is it that they're trying to create? What is it that you're hearing articulate that is a better idea than all men are created equal? What gets us closer to that? I haven't heard it. I've heard no kings. They don't want kings. And they want democracy. But they never go into what does that actually mean, and historically, what happens when you have a democracy. They fail every single time. So now they go out and you have Antifa. Now let me tell you the difference between our founders and Antifa, because, our kids are being taught that, what happened in the Boston Harbor in 1773 with the Boston Tea Party was the same that Antifa is doing. So let me tell you that story. Small band of colonists, they're farmers, they're shopkeepers, they're artisans, and they board 3 ships under the cover of night. Now, they're not faceless anarchists. They're husbands, they're fathers, they're sons of liberty, and they're not out to burn their own neighborhoods. In fact, they're not out to burn the ships themselves. What they want to do is make a statement against the king that had refused to listen to them. And so their protest is very targeted, very deliberate, and very symbolic. They board the ships, and they actually go to the captain of the ship and say, our argument is not with you. We don't want to hurt the ship. We just want the tea. And he says, look, just let me deliver it on board, and then you can do whatever you want. And we said, no, you can't. You can't deliver it. We have to throw it from your ship. Because once it's delivered, then the taxes, and he's like, yeah, but then I have to get paid. I have to get paid. And so how do I get paid? And so they talked to him, and he said, okay, if you throw it into the water and it's an attack, then I can get the insurance money, right? They swept up the ship after they put the tea in. Have you ever been taught this? They swept up. They got the permission from the captain, unbeknownst at the time to the king, and they swept up. And it was nonviolent, completely nonviolent. Nobody was hurt. Nothing was destroyed except for the tea. And they dumped that in because the king was saying, you have to pay taxes on it. And they were like, no, we're not paying any more taxes. We don't have a voice at all. You don't listen to us. You just keep taxing us. So we're not taking your tea. They left. No looting, no torched businesses, no innocent citizens bloodied in the streets. Property was destroyed, yes, but the destruction was purposeful, singular, squarely at the political grievance of taxation without representation, and nobody lost anything except for the insurance companies. Okay, now fast forward 250 years and look at what we have on the streets. The streets of Portland and Seattle are ablaze. Minneapolis, they set it on fire. Storefronts are smashed in their own communities. Federal courthouses are under siege. Neighborhoods turned into war zones. You have federal troops that are being attacked. These are not citizens demanding accountability from a king. They're saying no king. He's turning into a king. But, well, is he? Is he? Because so far, everything that he's done, he's going through and you're trying to stop in the courts. And when the court overturns it, that's when he goes in. And he's doing it exactly the way the Constitution is asking him to do it. Now, these groups are flying the black flag of Antifa. They are not bent on dismantling attacks, but the entire American system. The target's not representation. The target isn't, I want to be more free. The target is America itself. They are trying to destroy America itself. Our founders, so you know, they liked the king. They begged him, please listen to us. They didn't want to be divorced from England. In fact, when we won the war, I think it was Hamilton who said, you should just be a king, and maybe we should just go back to the king because I think they learned the lesson. No. Here's the bright line here. The Boston Tea Party was all about restraint. It was the language of very last resort when every petition, every plea, every legal pathway had been slammed shut by Parliament. And Sam Adams himself said it's the last rational step. Do you see anything that's happening on the streets of Portland? And can you describe that as rational? Can you see anything that is happening when they're calling for, I want to see that politician's wife hold their babies as they die in her arms because they've been shot? Do you think that's rational? John Adams wrote, it is so bold, so daring, so firm, so intrepid, so inflexible, it must have important consequences. They wanted liberty, but they also wanted order and justice and the rule of law. Antifa, contrast, they don't want any of that. They're not seeking reform. They seek destruction. Their own manifesto declares it. It's abolish capitalism, abolish police, abolish the very republic that the guys in Boston were trying to build. One side is destroying. The Sons of Liberty disguised themselves as Mohawk Indians, and they were making the symbolic strike against the British economic tyranny there. And they were doing it because they had to be able, for the ship's purposes and everything else, they had to be able to say it wasn't this. It was, Native Americans, et cetera, et cetera. But everybody knew it was the Americans. They knew it was the Sons of Liberty. Antifa is hiding behind masks, and these masks are to inflict terror on you, to sow chaos. They target small business owners. People have to beg, don't burn my building down. Ordinary Americans who have nothing to do with their grievance, if you get onto their sidewalk, quote, their sidewalks, do you think the founders ever said that these were their sidewalks? And what's the result? The Tea Party led to a constitutional republic. Okay? It was designed with checks and balances, designed for ordered liberty, designed to protect the individual and their rights. It wasn't perfect. But what happens when you have Antifa? What does that leave behind? Shattered glass, boarded up windows, billions in damage, fear, chaos. We're living in a point where we are really lucky to be alive. We're really, truly lucky to be alive because we're being tested on who are you really. I've thought about this for a long, long time. My dad grew up in a relatively good place. You know, he was, it was at the end of World War II. He saw the moonshot. He saw all the great times of America getting stronger and stronger. And then he saw bad times and good times again. But generally, with an exception of that rough time in the 60s, he wasn't pushed up against the wall. He grew up in, Seattle. We didn't have the race riots or anything else. And so he wasn't really pushed up against the wall ever in his life. And I wonder who he would have been had he been pushed up against the wall. I think I know, but I don't for sure. You're pushed up against the wall every day. In everything you do, you're pushed up against the wall. What do you believe? What do you believe? Is that what we're standing for? You're going to open your mouth? You're going to shut up and sit down? What are you going to do? And that's getting harder and harder to do. But history demands clarity. And we're seeing that clarity now. The American Revolution was about creation. Antifa is about tearing down. One birthed the world's longest standing constitutional government by far. The average constitution in the world lasts 17 years. We're approaching 250. 17 years. That's what our founders created. What has Antifa or anybody else on the left, have they created anything that is lasting? Or is it all coming undone and more chaos? Think about it. We're going to heal the streets. We're going to reduce the cops. We're going to change. Has any of that worked? We're going to do transgender surgery. Has that worked with your kids? Are your kids getting better or worse? All the way along, has any of it worked? Is any of it going to be anything but ashes in the end? This is why we have to draw a very clear line, and you're going to see it this weekend. Hopefully there's not going to be any bad things that are happening, but a passionate protest, a peaceful protest is protected and sacred in this country. But violent anarchism, whether it calls itself Antifa or under any other banner, has no place in the tradition of dissent here in America. Our founders would have recognized it immediately, not as liberty, but as tyranny and as a mob. So when somebody tells you that Antifa is just like the Tea Party, remember the Boston Tea Party. Remember Boston Harbor. Remember the restraint. Remember the clarity. Remember the purpose. When you look at the fires of Portland, the difference is not subtle. And the difference is between building a nation and burning one down. When they say this weekend, no kings, what are they actually asking for? What are they for? I know they're not for a king. I'm not for a king either. I don't want a king. But I'll follow that. No king but Christ. My first citizenship is to the kingdom of God. And I will serve that because me serving that makes me a better citizen. Because I love my neighbor. I want my neighbor to prosper. I don't hate my enemies. When I actually serve in my first kingdom, my first passport, and I serve that king, I look for somebody that can help manage all of the rest of it, can listen to the people and start to move in a healthy direction to make people more free and to make our country a more perfect nation. What are they for?